The state of wireless microphones here in the U.S. is pretty much awful right now. So, hey everyone, my name is Doug. I run a company in Orem, Utah called Doug Johnson Productions. We do live event video productions, so things like concerts, business conferences, sporting events, those sorts of things. As part of that, we do a lot with audio, and very often I have to provide wireless microphones for different things. And I've noticed something happening over the last 6 to 8 months. I mean, I knew that there have been changes in the market, but I didn't anticipate how bad it was going to get. So over the last 6 to 8 months, it's been next to impossible for me to find available open frequencies for my wireless mics. It's gotten so bad that on several occasions, including an event I did 2 weeks ago, my receivers won't find any available frequencies. They're basically saying the entire radio spectrum is fully utilized already. So what is it that happened? What's going on here? So first of all, let me mention that wireless microphones here in the U.S., at least on the professional level, almost exclusively use television UHF frequencies. So we operate in what's called the white spaces in between television broadcast channels. It's been that way for decades. There's been kind of this symbiotic relationship where frequencies are allocated for potential television broadcasts, and then any frequencies that are not actively being used are available for use by other devices. And that's worked pretty well until the last couple of years. So with the transition from analog to digital television a few years ago, we lost about 100 megahertz of spectrum in the 700 to 800 megahertz range. And right now we're undergoing another migration, so we're losing the 600 megahertz band. So we've lost another 100 megahertz. Additionally, as part of the digital transition a few years ago, most television stations that operated in VHF have moved to UHF. And so all those television stations that we used to have are now compressed down into what is basically just 130 megahertz, 138 megahertz of available spectrum. And the situation gets even worse because we've had a lot more television stations come online since the early 2000s, when all this stuff started to come to be. So we've got more television stations in roughly a quarter of the bandwidth that you used to have available for that. And then those of us who use wireless microphones are supposed to be able to find available unused spectrum somewhere in that range. Unfortunately, things have gotten so congested that we're at that point now where a lot of microphones just are not going to be able to find any available spectrum in order to be used. So I'll show you guys a chart that I put together here. This is a spreadsheet that I put together showing kind of the state of things here in the Salt Lake City market that I live in. So these days, the UHF television frequency band goes from 470 megahertz up to 608 right here. So any of the rows in red, those are the higher power local stations. So those frequencies are absolutely not available for use. Not only is it illegal to try to use those frequencies, they probably wouldn't even work well for you even if you tried. So, and then we have the ones in yellow, which are either farther away or lower power. But between the red and the yellow, they occupy almost every available frequency slot in this particular range. So there are a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which are not currently allocated by the FCC for this particular market. However, reality is actually a little bit different. So when I did an actual analysis of the radio frequency spectrum here in the area, let me get rid of my picture there. I found that nearly the entire band is actually already being used. So as we look at this chart, let's take a look at the top here first. So this peach color, this is the maximum level of frequency or of signal received on any given frequency, and then the green is lowest. So you kind of got a balance between the two. But basically, if you're seeing stuff that's in peach here, you don't want to be on those frequencies with a wireless microphone, at least unless that level is below about this line right here. And you see a little bit of a graphical representation of the use over time here. Red is absolutely in use. No way you're getting a microphone to work. Illegal to try. Green, in use. Also illegal to try. Some people still do attempt to use microphones in these kinds of ranges, and sometimes they can sort of make them work, but you're definitely subject to interference and dropouts through that. So we really only have, in this area where I'm at, we really only have this tiny range right here in blue that's not currently being occupied. But it's even worse because we still have one television station which hasn't migrated yet, and it's going to take up some of that space. So the reality is, even though it shows theoretically on the registration that we should have frequencies available for wireless microphone use, the reality is that we really don't. Just all the existing spectrum is pretty much taken up. Now, this band right here, this blue band, of the roughly 30 wireless microphones that I own, only 6 of them can operate in that frequency range, which I have a lot of situations where I need more than 6 mics, and so it's put me in a pretty tough situation. So I was wondering, we've known about this for a while, but I didn't think it was going to be this bad, because we've had more stations come online and more spectrum actually got reallocated than was initially planned. But I wondered what the FCC had to say about this and what they're recommending for people running wireless microphones. So they've got this page set up. It's more in a friendly jargon, a little less technically oriented than some of the other documents on their site. But this one, basically there to explain what the situation is for people who are shopping for wireless microphones. And so this is what they're saying. So these are the frequencies that are available for use by wireless microphones. So they're saying VHF and UHF frequencies for television channels 2 through 36, which are basically the channels that fall below 608 megahertz. Problem with that, I haven't seen any VHF microphones for a long time, at least not in professional space. And then UHF, I've already discussed the status of that, where basically all those frequencies are already being used, so there's nothing left. All right, then we get to certain frequencies in the 600 megahertz guard band, so between 614 and 616 megahertz. Well, a couple problems there. First of all, it's only 2 megahertz, so you're not going to get very many mics in there anyway. And then second of all, those are considered lower power bands, so the maximum output for microphones in that range is 20 milliwatts instead of the normal 50 milliwatts, so 40% of the power, which significantly reduces your range. In addition to that, there are hardly any microphones that are sold that will operate in that band. All right, go to the next option. So certain frequencies in the 600 megahertz duplex gap, so 653 to 657 for licensed microphone use, and 657 to 663 for unlicensed use. Again, these are also low power ranges, and not a lot of bandwidth, and very few products operate in this range. And so it's referring here to license use. In the U.S., large entities that are going to be likely to be operating 50 or more microphones simultaneously can apply for a license to use their mics. Anybody that uses anything less is not eligible for a license, and you're required to operate basically in unlicensed frequency bands. That's going to be the majority of us, and there aren't very many of us around that are going to be using 50 microphones simultaneously at any given event, and so basically trying to get a license is next to impossible for the vast majority of us in the industry. All right, so basically UHF, those are all UHF frequencies, not a lot available, especially when you consider that almost no products are actually working in no products are available to work in those bands. So we're going to scroll down a little bit further here. So unlicensed microphone use is permitted in the 902 to 928 megahertz band, 1920 to 1930, and then some in the 2.4 and 5 gigahertz bands. Well, shopping around, I found almost no professional microphones that operate in any of those bands, especially 902 and 1920. Nothing professional in either one of those. And then when you get into 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, those are the same frequencies that are used by Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. And so you're competing against everybody's cell phone at the particular location. In addition to other uses, there are some wireless video transmission systems out there, and medical equipment that's operating in those frequency ranges. There's all sorts of stuff that's operating in those 2.4 and 5 gigahertz ranges. So I wouldn't try and use those. I do actually own about 4 wireless systems that operate in the 2.4 gigahertz. They operate okay at short range, but they break down pretty quickly. And that's the other problem with these higher frequencies. Like, the higher the frequency, the shorter the range is, and the more likely the signal is to be interrupted by obstacles between the transmitter and the receiver. Those higher frequencies just don't travel around objects as well as lower frequencies do. So, not great. And then scroll down a little bit, or look a little bit further down here and say licensed use is permitted on certain portions of the 900 megahertz band between 1435 and 1525, and then 68 or 6.8 to 7.1 gigahertz. Again, that's just licensed use, and you're getting into some really high frequencies. I saw a demonstration a little while ago of some new wireless equipment for computer networks. Operates in high frequency range. In this case, it was considerably higher than this, but the signal was blocked by something as thin as a sheet of paper, and so it's just not a good idea to be trying to operate wireless microphones. Anything that requires reliability at super high frequencies. So what are we left with? Well, the basic answer is nothing at the moment. So the wireless microphone manufacturers have been trying to get the FCC to allocate some spectrum just for wireless microphone use, but so far their efforts have been unsuccessful. Compared to the size of wireless carriers and other entities that are purchasing up this spectrum, the wireless microphone industry is really pretty small and doesn't have a lot of money to lobby and get any laws put into place in order to pre-allocate spectrum specifically for them. And so we're kind of in a bit of a mess now. So what are the manufacturers currently doing? Well, basic answer is they're still selling the same systems they've been selling for years. So if you go on to like BH Photo video website and take a look at professional wireless microphone systems, almost all of them still are in the television UHF frequency band, which basically means if they're not already useless, they're soon going to be useless just because of interference and the pre-allocation for television channels. So right now we don't have a good answer for that. So bottom line here is if you're trying to buy a wireless microphone right now, I would have to recommend that you don't do it. If you really need something, go find something used, or you can buy something in the 600 megahertz range that you can use until the completion of the migration in 2020. However, that spectrum has already been sold, and like carriers are starting to actually bring things online, and once they start transmitting on the frequencies that they bought, you have to get off. You're not allowed to use those frequencies any longer, and we're already starting to see some use of those things. In fact, I did a capture of the 600 megahertz band in my area, and there's a little bit going on. Not a lot just yet, but there's a little bit. And you can see that there's green, so there's just kind of some low-level background noise on those. And it's far less busy than 500 megahertz. But bottom line is, those frequencies are going to be going away probably sooner than you think. A lot of online frequently asked questions pages are mentioning that there's a 39-month transition. Well, there is, but that 39 months basically means that as soon as the company that purchased the spectrum starts to bring something online, you've got to vacate. You're not allowed to be on those frequencies any longer, and that can happen at any point in the next roughly 2 years. So I would not be making any investments into 600 megahertz equipment right now, just because it's going to become useless 2 years from now. So ironically, I've run into a considerable number of people who are still operating microphones in the 700 megahertz band, even though that is very much against the law. But they're doing it because there is spectrum available. They're able to do it without interference. A lot of those frequencies that have been sold to other companies are not really being used yet, and so these guys who are not following the law, not playing by the rules, are in a better situation than those of us who are trying to play by the rules. We're in a situation where we don't have equipment we can use, but those guys who have equipment that's 10 plus years old, they're able to make it work. So it's one of those situations where the people who are breaking the rules are being rewarded for what they're doing. So anyway, if you guys have your own horror stories associated with trying to make wireless microphones work, I'd love to hear about those in the comments. If you figured out a solution that actually works for you, I'd love to hear about that as well. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. I do try to do content related to video production topics about once a week. Produce videos about once a week on average. If you guys have any other questions for me, you can leave those in the comments, or you can go to my website, djprod.biz. You can click on the Contact Us link down at the bottom page, or go directly to djp.li/contact, and you can get in touch with me there. Thanks guys for watching, and I'd love to have you come back and see us again, and have a fantastic day.